This photo says it all. The tariff men. Trump front and center, flanked by McKinley, Lincoln, Clay and Jefferson, puts him in the long line of US leaders who knew how to flex economic muscle. Trump's 50% tariffs on imports, steel, aluminum and key goods? Just the latest move in centuries-old playbook. Tariffs, sanctions, trade wars, they're not new. America has been weaponizing its economy for generations. So the real question is, why does the US always reach for economic power, and does it actually work or just make a show of strength? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. Trump's trade attack has deep roots. The US has always used tariffs to protect itself, fund government, and push political goals. In 1789, Congress passed the Tariff Act, setting duties on imports to fund the young nation and boost American industry. Northern manufacturers cheered, Southern farmers bristled. Thomas Jefferson, president a decade later, preferred low tariffs to keep trade flowing and imports affordable, warning against burdening agrarian states. Over time, leaders like Henry Clay, Abraham Lincoln, and William McKinley embraced tariffs as instruments of economic power. From the Great Depression's Smoot-Hawley disaster to Trump's trade wars with China, the US has repeatedly weaponized trade. India now faces the same tactic. Will it bend or fight back? Modi has chosen defiance. Thomas Jefferson, president from 1801 to 1809, opposed high protective tariffs. He favored low duties to encourage trade and keep goods affordable, reflecting the agrarian economy of the young nation. Jefferson's philosophy: limited government, free markets, and minimal interference. He enacted the Embargo Act of 1807 to avoid conflict with Britain and France, halting US maritime trade. This wasn't a tariff per se, but it showed early experiments with economic coercion. Southern states, reliant on imports, welcomed low tariffs. Northern manufacturers wanted higher rates. This sectional tension foreshadowed decades of tariff debates, culminating in the infamous Tariff of Abominations 1828. Jefferson's stance contrasts sharply with later protectionist leaders like Clay, Lincoln, and McKinley, and even today's Trump, who sees tariffs as weapons rather than revenue tools.
So the second act passed by Congress under the new Constitution in 1789 was a tariff act, because the government, newly independent, we have these war debts, we need to fund the national government. One of the problems with the Articles of Confederation is that there's no power of taxation on the part of the national government. The Constitution remedied that, and so they needed revenue. And so the main purpose of the tariff prior to the Civil War was revenue.
Henry Clay's American system shaped 19th century protectionism. He argued for three pillars: protective tariffs to shield US industries, a national bank to stabilize commerce, and federally funded infrastructure to unify markets. High tariffs made imports costly, encouraging Americans to buy domestic goods. Clay's plan aimed to reduce foreign dependence and strengthen the US economy. Southern states opposed high duties, feeling unfairly burdened, but Northern industrialists prospered.
First, he didn't want American prosperity to depend on any other country. And second, he wanted ours to be a diverse industrial economy that had capacity in various industries of great importance. And that vision and the work, and him and others who followed, it literally steered the course of history. Economic independence is what helped preserve the Union in many ways, and in the early years of the Republic. And less than 100 years later, that diverse industrial capacity that he envisioned, well, that actually became the war machine that defeated Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan to the scales of World War II.
This vision influenced Abraham Lincoln, who inherited the protectionist mantle, using tariffs to support industry and fund government. Clay's philosophy also inspired William McKinley and indirectly Donald Trump. In other words, Trump's modern tariffs are not innovation. They are a part of a 200-year-old playbook designed to protect, pressure, and project US power.
We're going to be doing a lot of things, but we're lowering taxes. We're going to use tariffs very, very wisely. You know, our country in the 1890s was probably, Marcia, probably the wealthiest it ever was because it was a system of tariffs. And we had a president, you know, McKinley, right? You remember Mount McKinley, and then they changed the name, but one of those things, he was really a very good businessman, and he took in billions of dollars at the time, which today it's always trillions, but then it was billions and probably hundreds of millions. But we were a very wealthy country.
Abraham Lincoln fully embraced tariffs as a cornerstone of economic strategy. The Morrill Tariff of 1861, passed just before his inauguration, raised rates from roughly 15% to 37.5% and later climbing above 47%. It aimed to fund the Civil War and protect domestic manufacturing. Lincoln owed his nomination and election to Northern protectionists demanding high tariffs to shield American industry from Europe. In his first inaugural address, he warned that refusal to pay tariffs could provoke military intervention. The policy deepened the North-South divide. Industrial North benefited, and agrarian South paid disproportionately and resented the system. Lincoln's tariff stance followed Henry Clay's American system, proving that protectionist trade policy could serve as both revenue generator and strategic tool. Today, Trump's 50% tariff on India mirrors Lincoln-era logic: high stakes, clear messaging, and pressure through economic leverage. William McKinley, celebrated by Trump as inspiration, made tariffs central to U.S. policy. As the House Ways and Means Committee chairman, he authored the McKinley Tariff Act of 1890, raising average import duties to nearly 50%, with tin plates spiking from 30% to 70% and wool goods sharply higher. The goal? Protect emerging industries like steel, textiles, and tin, stabilize the economy, and shield American workers from foreign pauper labor. Consumer prices rose, provoking backlash and political losses for Republicans in 1890. As president, McKinley passed the Dingley Tariff of 1897, setting rates near 57%, the highest in U.S. history. Tariffs now had dual purpose: economic shield and moral imperative. Trump's approach to India mirrors this philosophy: high rates, protectionist framing, and strategic signaling. McKinley's legacy: tariffs as power, protection, and political theater. The Civil War era cemented tariffs as political weapons. With Southern secession, the Morrill Tariff fueled Northern industry and government revenue. From 1861 to 1932, average rates hovered between 40 to 50%, showing consistent protectionist strategy. Democratic efforts to cut tariffs repeatedly failed. Reform was hard against entrenched interests. High tariffs supported industrial growth but created regional tensions. Trump's 50% tariff on India reflects this strategy centuries later. Use economic tools to push political objectives. History teaches that tariffs can shield domestic markets and coerce foreign nations simultaneously. India faces a familiar challenge: resist U.S. economic pressure while safeguarding growth. The 1930 Smoot-Hawley tariff dramatized the risks of overreach. Over 20,000 goods faced steep duties to protect U.S. farmers and industry. Global retaliation slashed trade. Imports fell 40% in 2 years, and the Great Depression worsened. Tariffs punished others but also hurt the home economy. Trump's tariffs on India echo this history: visible, high stakes, designed to extract concessions, but risky. Economically, tariffs raise costs and disrupt markets. Politically, they signal power. India's response? Tax reform, GST changes, self-reliance, is a modern echo of past resistance to US pressure. History proves tariffs are double-edged tools of leverage that can boomerang if not balanced carefully. The 1934 Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act marked a shift. The president could negotiate tariff reductions, paving the way for multilateral trade agreements. Post-World War II, the US-led GATT, that is, Generalized Agreement for Trade and Tariffs, and later the WTO, which is World Trade Organization, steadily cutting average rates to about 5%, free trade became a tool for alliances and stability. Trump's tariffs on India are a direct continuation, strategic, visible, and selective. The principle remains centuries old: combine trade benefits with coercion. India's resistance, self-reliance, domestic stimulus is equally historical, reflecting how nations respond to US economic pressure over time. During the Cold War, sanctions complemented tariffs. Tariffs hit imports, sanctions hit adversaries. Cuba, the USSR, North Korea, and allies faced embargoes, asset freezes, and military export bans. The Trading with Enemy Act and Export Administration Act provided legal cover. Goals: deny arms, pressure for diplomacy, and weaken adversaries financially. Secondary sanctions punished firms trading with target countries, expanding US influence. Trump's 50% tariff on India, especially tied to Russian oil, mirrors this strategy. Weaponizing economics to influence policy is long-standing US practice. India's counter: tax relief, GST overhaul, and domestic growth campaigns. Strategy and defiance repeat in cycles, centuries apart. After 1991, tariffs dropped, sanctions sharpened, NAFTA, WTO, and bilateral deals lowered trade barriers, yet trade disputes persisted. Sanctions targeted terrorism, nuclear ambitions, and rogue states: Iran, North Korea, Russia. The US leveraged the dollar to pressure non-US firms, applying extraterritorial force. History repeats itself, and India's firm response proves that leverage has limits when nations protect their sovereignty. China's rise triggered 21st century tariff wars. Bush, Obama, and Trump imposed duties over subsidies, IP theft, and currency issues. The US-China trade war hit 145% tariffs on Chinese goods. China retaliated. Allies also felt ad hoc pressure: Canada, Mexico, Japan, the EU. Supply chains shattered.
So India needs to cultivate markets in the rest of the world. So I think diversification is a core part of the strategy. The BRICS is a very core part of that. India will have the presidency of the BRICS in 2026, and that's a very good thing. So I would not depend on begging the U.S. for mercy. I would not. I don't think you'll get a stable relationship out of that. Of course, I'm not against negotiations. I don't want to be misunderstood. But India absolutely has interests and abilities to diversify its trade all over the world.
Tariffs aren't alone. US sanctions target weapons and military sectors as well. Cold War embargoes blocked arms, technology, and strategic materials. Iran, North Korea, Syria, and proxies like Hamas faced restrictions. Secondary sanctions punished non-US firms trading with prohibited actors. The campaigns in the 2010s and 2020s, maximum pressure on Iran. Russia post-Crimea used precise blocking, freezing, and disruption. Goals: prevent WMDs, disrupt hostile militaries, deny terrorists arms, push diplomacy. India's defiance: reforms and strengthening its own domestic markets, reflects historical patterns, resisting economic coercion while protecting sovereignty. Trump's India tariffs are part of centuries of US economic statecraft, weaponizing trade as both signal and leverage. Today's tariffs are part of a sophisticated toolkit, targeted, selective, and combined with sanctions, secondary penalties, and diplomatic pressure. The US Treasury and Commerce Departments monitor global trade flows, identify vulnerabilities, and apply tariffs strategically. Trump's India tariffs, framed around Russian oil purchases, follow this model. They're less about revenue and more about leverage, coercion dressed as economics. History reinforces the pattern. From 1789 to the 2020s, tariffs have oscillated between fiscal necessity, protectionist strategy, and geopolitical instrument. India's response: industrial promotion, tax reform, and self-reliance campaigns, demonstrates that strategic policy can neutralize even the sharpest tariffs. Lessons from Lincoln, McKinley, and Smoot-Hawley show that tariffs succeed only when the target is weak or dependent. India's defiance is a textbook example of counter-strategic resilience. From Jefferson's caution to Trump's 50% tariffs, America has always weaponized trade. But history shows tariffs only bite when the target is weak. India is standing firm. Prime Minister Modi has made promises to the farmers that he is going to protect them. The question is, who is going to blink first, America or India? Thank you for watching Statecraft.